Hey, it's Jared with Gear and Light. Today we're going to talk about the 14mm G Master lens from Sony. I've had a little bit of time to use this lens. As you can see, it is a rental. I don't own this lens, but it is from Lens Rentals, and I've wanted to spend some time with this lens because I do own a majority of the G Master lenses. I absolutely love them. They're fantastic lenses, both in performance. I mean, everything about them is great, and especially when paired with a Sony camera. But the 14mm I didn't see as being a lens that I would utilize that often. I do shoot a lot of real estate from time to time, and you need a wider lens with that situation. But I have lenses that cover that base of the 14mm range, and so having a prime that would lock me down to a focal length, I just didn't know if I would have a use for this lens, and I only imagined myself using it in a situation like that. However, this lens has proven my thoughts incorrect and may be a lens that I'll be picking up soon, and we're going to talk about why in this video. So I'm going to be showing you photos that I've captured with this, and I'm going to talk about those photos and of course the performance of the lens and just what I've felt as I've used it. As far as specs and all of that, and people who measure the sharpness from center to the edges, we're going to let the images speak for themselves when we talk about this lens here. I'm not going to get into those details. There are other reviewers that have talked about that stuff in great length. So I've used this lens both on the Sony A1, which is what it's currently mounted on, and the Sony A7C. Those are the two cameras that I've utilized it on. So the highest end camera that Sony has to offer, and perhaps the lowest end full frame camera that Sony has to offer. So hopefully my review won't be totally skewed to utilizing this lens on an expensive camera. So the first image that we're going to look at is a picture of food, because why not? I had put the lens, I had just got it, I put the lens on the A7C, and that night went out on a date with my wife. And so I took a picture of the food. It was just the first thing that was in front of me to take a picture of. And, I've had wide lenses before, 15mm. I've had zooms that fit that range. And often when I take a picture with a lens that is that wide, there is obvious distortion to the image, and it's just not a very appealing image to me. I would rather have something like a 35mm where I pull back a little bit and get an image that is cropped similar to this image of food. But when you look at this image, this is natural. As I didn't add any blur, I didn't add anything to this. All I added was the lens correction in Lightroom, and then made a couple of adjustments to contrast and colors just to make a few colors pop a little bit. But if you look at the image and the fall off, it draws you in to the center of the image. The fall off here that is natural from the lens is very nice. It's very appealing to the eye. It very much feels like when I am looking at something from that distance, our eyes have natural fall off and focus on the outer edges. And to me, this image, just right out of the camera as far as the sharpness goes, draws your eye to the subject in the image, which that first image I was just kind of blown away, and I thought, you know what, maybe I am gonna like this lens. And so we went a little bit later. We were walking alongside Flathead Lake, and there was this little dock here, and I took this picture. And I did zoom in just a little bit, or I did crop in just a little bit on this picture, but this picture is amazing to me. I mean, the sun, you can see where the sun is. It's pointing directly into the lens. And even though I added a little bit to this image, a little bit of clarity, of course I used the lens correction here, which I'd like to show you when I turn off lens correction. It doesn't do a ton. It stretches out the edges just a little bit to deal with that natural tendency for some curvature in the edges, but it doesn't do a whole lot other than just add a little bit of brightness to those edges so that you have you don't have that darkness fall off, which is going to be different based on the image that you take. In an image like this of the sky in the evening, there's naturally going to be some fall off along the edges with pretty much all lenses. So the lens correction is not drastic, and there isn't a whole lot needed for this lens. Really, the photo didn't look any better or worse with the lens correction turned on or off. So I was impressed with this because with the sun coming pretty much directly in to the glass, there were not those typical issues that you would have with sun coming in, flaring, hot spots and different things like that that just make an image look bad. This image is very appealing. And you can see I tried a couple of others here. This one, I don't think I remembered to straighten. I obviously was a little askew myself in taking this image. Turning to my right, standing in the same position, this image just very nice. I mean, everything from the detail in the trees and the sky, and if I zoom in a little bit here, and you can see just the detail in the trees, and as I get in even really far, that goes beyond the zoom, 100% zoom of the image, things are still looking pretty good. And so I was really impressed this evening, this being the first night, and I'm still shooting on the A7C because that's the camera that I had with me. And yet another, I was kind of blown away. So as the sun continued to move through the sky a little bit, I continued to take this photo just to see, like, can I make this lens fail in this instance with the sun? Turning to my left now, the other side, taking a photo, really just beautiful detail in the sky, of course, a little bit of post-processing in Lightroom to really make things pop, but you can see the detail up there. Lenses can lose this detail, especially as you go out to the edges. This lens just produces magnificent images. So I'll continue to go through. There's my wife was down at the end, and she was jumping, and so I did an image of her jumping. You can see just a fantastic flare coming off of the contrast there. Natural, I mean, just really, really great. That flare is awesome. It looks beautiful, and it really makes the image pop. You can see a little bit, probably a little bit of ghosting here from my edits being a little too strong, but that's not from the lens itself. That's just from me pushing some of the limits in editing. And then we were in another spot. Well, you could see the dock at the bottom right. We weren't too far from that dock. The sun was starting to set, and it's just producing images that are fantastic. The only thing being this far away from those mountains in the background is that shooting with a 14mm does make everything far out in the distance seem smaller. That mountain is significantly larger, as this is Flathead Lake, which has large mountains pretty much on either side of it. Here, just kind of showing the depth of field fall off, still with the A7C. We haven't even gone to the A1 yet. I focused on this area kind of close to me because I wanted to see the depth of the sharpness, and I wanted to see that fall off both leading in to the area that's in focus and leading away from the area that's in focus. And it's an intriguing image. It's not a great image. The tree stump that was fallen and kind of rotted was kind of on a tilt, and so I had a hard time deciding how I wanted to orient the camera and then orient the crop here. But this image is, in my opinion, a good example of looking at that fall off, which with some lenses doesn't look that great. But with this lens, it does look really good. The only thing this image is missing is a subject that's in that center focus there. I lowered the camera a bit, just trying to get creative and shoot an image between these two small rocks, because when you have something like a 14mm lens, it can make everything look large and make things look small. This path here in between these two rocks was really only about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 inches tall, but it just looks pretty cool, and definitely was fun just testing this lens and seeing what it would do. Mentioning again the focus leading you into the center of the image naturally with this lens. You can see that in the rock on the left. It leads you into the path in between these two rocks. Here I am again on the dock taking a picture. I took a selfie of my wife and I, which didn't pan out too well. I was trying to hold the camera from the side that the shutter button is not on, which is tricky. I probably should have sat on the other side of her. Then we moved on to a different position, a different location. Here I caught a little bit of water splashing off of the rock. Sun is getting closer to setting. You know, these images are just interesting and fun to me. It looks like a calm, just relaxing place to be, and I can tell that by the image, which it's exactly what it was in person. And so I captured a couple of images like that. Here's an image, a product image that I was trying to shoot for a client of these products. I was just holding the product in my hand, shooting my hand out in my front yard. Obviously, you know, the focus fall off, not only because there's a difference in depth between the subject and the ground, but just the natural way that this lens handles that is very beautiful. And this image was appealing to me. I didn't think it was going to be appealing to me when I took it. I thought, this image isn't going to be good, I'm not going to use this. But then when I saw it, I thought, you know, there's separation there and it feels good to me. And so we ended up using it on their social media. Going up to Bowman Lake in West Glacier, I had the lens and I was switching the lens between the A7C and the A1 at this point, and you know, trying to see if there was any differences. Obviously there are with the camera itself, but the images are almost indecipherable to tell between one versus the other camera. So these images, all with that lens. Not the most ideal time of day to shoot there because of the sun being behind us, casting you know, all of these glares on the water, and the water not being glassy smooth, so the reflections of everything behind it you know, not being ideal, but still you know, beautiful images. Some of these images direct, some of them have a little bit of processing, but some of them direct out of camera. You could see here just how straight the horizon line is, and if we once again go and turn off lens correction, you can see that it really doesn't need much to correct for that. The lens is so perfect by itself, it doesn't really need much correction. And then of course, you know, whenever I'm anywhere, I shoot some obligatory camera photos. And so there's the A7C with the 50mm G Master on it. And so of course I'm shooting with this configuration here, the A1 and the 14mm G Master lens, which this isn't a very great photo. Too many weird things happening in this photo, but a sample nonetheless. A portrait, I mean, my daughter being a little explorer and all over the place, once or twice got her to stare at the camera. And, you know, I was pretty close to her, obviously, because of the 14mm lens. But a lot of times with a 14mm, it's very hard to take a photo of someone. And I think that this image looks great. Obviously, we've all seen the differences in how a person appears with different focal lengths, and so, you know, she seems really narrow, which she is very skinny, but she seems pretty narrow. But I like this photo. It's a great photo of what was taking place in the moment, which was, you know, her grabbing rocks and running around and being a little busybody. And then, you know, when she found the stick that she just couldn't leave behind, showing me that stick, and there's a little bit of sun flare up in the top corner because of the transition and contrast between the sky and the trees, and the sun spilling over into the trees. And so, you know, it's not a perfect image, but it's definitely an image that I'm proud to have. This image here, as we were walking back to the car, you know, obviously with a 14mm, a lens like this, or a lens like that is tough to get an image like this. You know, I was pretty close, and with a, you know, shallow depth of field, but I've got her, my daughter, I've got, you know, my wife carrying her. You know, things aren't as great in the background of the image just because of the light and where we were when I took the picture. But I do like the image. I really like the image. And then there was one more there, and I believe that is it from this photo series. So My thoughts on the lens are it's definitely not my first choice of lenses. 14 millimeters is quite wide. You know, I've got other lenses that are zooms that cover the 14 millimeter spectrum, but this lens does things that those zoom lenses cannot do, which is produce a fantastic image without much distortion. Look at the trees here in this image. It's a perfect example. As you look at the trees that are on the outer edge, most lenses would bow those trees. And if I turn off our lens corrections here, you can see it does nothing to straighten those trees. Those trees are straight like they're supposed to be. They're not curved. There aren't any issues there that the lens produced. And so those things really, to me, make this lens a very strong lens and a lens that I may need to have for real estate. Now, I have to send this lens back today. I have a real estate job tomorrow, so unfortunately I'm not going to have an opportunity to use it in that situation. But knowing that this lens can perform in wide situations and keep the distortion to a minimum and also provide a beautiful fall off is huge and something that I think will warrant me purchasing it. It's something that my 24mm G Master, my 35mm G Master can't achieve in those situations where you need a wider field of view that the 14mm can achieve. So I probably will be purchasing this. I have to do some more thinking because it's not, G Master lenses are not cheap, and I own a lot of G Master lenses. But I could highly recommend it to anybody who is considering it. I've never used a lens that covers the range of 14mm that produces images that are this appealing. So with that said, yes, I could recommend it. I do think it's worth the price if you have that budget available. And I would urge you to purchase it if it is something that you think that you need and have a use for. So with that said, I will defer to all of you, and let's talk about it down in the comments. If you have any specific questions or use case questions, let's talk about it down in the comment section. I'll do my best to help you help answer those questions. But it is definitely a lens that you need to experience. And you can experience it by renting it like I did, or you can experience it by just purchasing it. Or maybe you're lucky enough to have a camera store nearby. But if you want to purchase it, I've got a link down in the description below. Using the links that I provide in the description don't cost you anything, but they are affiliate links that do help support my channel here, help us pay the bills and all of that good stuff, and keep making videos like this. So thanks for doing that in advance. Click the thumbs up if you like this video. Click the subscribe button to be notified when we put out new ones, and I hope to see you back soon. Take care.